Released in 1995, Carnosaur 2 is the sequel to 1993's Carnosaur. Once again produced by Roger Corman, Carnosaur 2 is a film that rips off another work, much like the original. Only this time, it's worse. Carnosaur was a shoddy attempt to cash in on Jurassic Park, a film that was coming out at the time. Carnosaur 2 decided to knock off Aliens, a film that came out 9 years prior. Carnosaur 2 is the worst kind of cinematic thievery. It takes the entire plot to Aliens, replaces the characters with shittier, one-dimensional stand-ins, and drops the xenomorph in favor of awful, croaking dinosaurs. This film is literally, beat for beat, the same movie. It centers around a work colony that mysteriously goes AFK, so a team of specialists go in to see what happened. When they get there, they find the place in shambles, and find a child who is the lone survivor. They learn that the place is overrun with creatures that have killed everyone, and before long they're ambushed and lose a number of their crew. As they regroup to try and devise an escape strategy, they discover that the company they worked for knew all along that the creatures were there, and had every intention of retrieving a specimen and considered all parties involved expendable. The group fights for their life, blows some shit up, and eventually it comes down to the climactic ending, where one of our heroes faces off against the largest of the creatures with a power loader, defeating it by knocking it down a vast and expansive empty space. Along the line, there's a double suicide by grenade, a surrogate parental relationship is formed, one of the crew turns out to be a corporate goon, and the aircraft that is to be their means of escape is taken down when the pilot is eaten from the cockpit and it crashes. I know I mentioned before that the first Carnosaur was a ripoff of Jurassic Park, and that's true, and anytime a movie is made for the sole purpose of cashing in on another movie, it's bad, and you're in for a crappy film. But Carnosaur came out a few weeks before Jurassic Park, so it at least had the decency to come up with some original ideas. It had to. But this? There's no excuse for this. Stripping the entire plot to another film, one that's completely unrelated and distant, is inexcusable. If you want to turn Carnosaur to a franchise, fine. They had the opportunity to do something original and fresh and maybe even good. As sloppy as the original was, it's not like it didn't have a premise that couldn't turn out something interesting. By the end of the first one, almost an entire town disappears overnight. People die, a virus spreads. The government comes in, covers up the whole thing. There's unresolved plot elements. Why not play off that? Surely someone is bound to have lost someone in that event. You know what happens when people go missing out of the blue? They investigate. You could have done something about that. Follow that storyline. But no. Instead, they just decided to look at an already successful film and figured it'd be much easier to copy and paste it into this tripe. To be fair, it's not like I really expected more from Carnosaur 2, but this style of filmmaking is just lazy and I hate it. Even with the creative elements of this film being ostensibly plagiarism, there are of course some original aspects. The acting, set design, and creature effects, for example. As far as I go, there's nothing good here. The acting in this film is actually better than its predecessor. Not by much, but slightly. That may sound like a good thing, but it's actually way less entertaining at the end of the day. Carnosaur had a pretty bad script, but there were some lines that were funny and memorable because of the delivery that the actors gave. Every so often you'd hear some wacky shit and get a laugh. Carnosaur 2 has actors that have slightly better delivery, but the dialogue is worse. The lines are weak sauce, so what you get is just boring and flat. The set design is fair, I guess. You get the impression that they're in some sort of facility, and that's what they were going for. Things do look cheap, but that's par for the course. The creature effects are basically the same as before, only implemented much worse. I think they used exactly the same suits because they're almost indecipherable from Carnosaur. But whereas Carnosaur was done with primarily one dinosaur for most of the movie, Carnosaur 2 has like a dozen or so. Hey, whatever, more dinosaurs, more action, right? Wrong. Apart from the time someone gets eaten, any other time the specialists engage with one of the dinosaurs, they're usually just standing there waddling about like they're lost. They just blow them up and keep on moving, wasting most of them through the duration of the film. Eventually you start to realize how little of a threat they've become, and it all just starts getting disinteresting. I will say, there was one thing I did like about the film. Early on there's a sequence where the dinosaurs first attack the work colony. It introduces us to the kid, the setting, and some of the elements that'll show up later, like the loader that's used to fight the T-Rex at the end of the film. We're taken through a good part of the facility and end up at a bar where the attack actually occurs. And I think that sequence actually sets a good tone and stakes for the movie going forward. I'm not saying this scene is a masterpiece. far from it, but I'm saying that it gets the job done, and frankly, I was genuinely interested in seeing how things would play out afterwards. Too bad it immediately drops the ball when it decides to fill in the rest of the story like an aliens-themed Mad Lib. Ultimately, I think the worst thing about Carnosaur 2 is the wasted potential. Admittedly, any sequel to Carnosaur didn't have much potential to begin with, but even with the lowest grade of B movies, I hate to see something so unoriginal being slapped together with no care or effort involved. It's so extremely lazy to just adopt another script, change it in the most minute ways, and present it as a new work. I love B movies. I love shitty, campy monster movies. I love plenty of low-grade, schlocky horror, sci-fi, and action flicks. They can be great fun. I even love some of Corman's pictures. But the one thing I hate in cinema above everything else is laziness. It's perfectly okay to try something in a film and fail. It's fine to try and make something that just comes out bad. But not trying at all is inexcusable, no matter what kind of film it is. Even with the first being a cheap cash-in, I still enjoyed it for what it was. A cheap, silly monster flick. Sure, it was trying to make its money on the back of another film, but at least had to come up with some original content to present to the audience. It's a shallow film, one that glorifies the mess it makes more than what it was marketing itself to be. It's dog shit, and that's fine. Carnosaur 2 is also dog shit. But it's dog shit that was taken from another dog, eaten, and shat out again. Final rating, 2 out of 10.